how do you help a company, or what should a company be worried about? Well, you just be worried about anything you can get sued for a lot of money. So
You have found Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggles, stories, and triumphant successes of business owners across the land. Downloadable audio episodes can be found in the podcast link found at drawInCustomers.com. We are locally underwritten by the Bank of Sun Prairie, and today we're welcoming / preparing to learn from Arta Wildeboer, an attorney that helps all kinds of people. And this is interesting because he's in California, which if any of you have actually done business in any states, including California, I feel like California has got to be one of the worst states to actually do business in. So anyways, Arta, welcome to the show.
James, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm a lawyer, so I love to talk and
Yeah.
love to talk about myself and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a great opportunity. Thank you so much.
Yeah, by all means. So let's start with, you're an attorney, you have your own practice. How long have you had your own practice?
Well, I started practicing in January of 2013. That's when I first opened my office. I had passed the bar and got my license at the end of 2012. And so in 2013, I figured I'd make a fresh start of it in January and put out my shingle, as they say, for solo attorneys and started practicing. So it's been, 11 years now.
All right, nice. And what made you decide to get into the whole legal, being an attorney kind of thing?
Well, I mean, we always joke that attorneys always joke we're bad at math, so this was like the one thing that we could do, and so it was kind of like that. I guess I grew up. My parents are I'm first generation. My parents are from Iran. My mom is from Iran. My dad is from Holland. They met here, and just growing up, I saw my family had a lot of trouble in business with just the legal aspects and signing contracts and kind of just getting taken advantage of. And so I kind of wanted to help out. That's where it started. I just was very much attracted to the ability to just go from different industries and take a peek at what people are doing and what different industries are like. And it's a little bit like being a detective sometimes. So it's a lot of fun in that sense. It's also extremely stressful.
I imagine so. So tell me, I guess I should know this, but I don't. What does it take to be an attorney?
Well, you first, so I'll just say the general case. You have to usually have a bachelor's degree to be able to get into law school. And there's an entrance exam for law school called the LSAT. With a bachelor's degree, a good GPA, and a decent LSAT score, you go to law school, and then law school is typically 3 years. After law school, after you graduate, you take the bar exam. In most states. In California, there's a bar exam. I think a couple states, maybe like Wisconsin, you don't actually have to pass the bar. You can just go to law school there and you can practice. I think Kansas might be the same. But yeah, typically you have to pass the bar. And California, for better or worse, has one of the hardest bar exams that there are. So it's got a famously low passage rate these days. And it's become a little bit of a problem. But that's generally the process.
Okay. And you got to help me out. Why do they call it the bar exam?
I think it has to do with in England with the barristers and the solicitors. I think where they stood to address the judge was called the bar. And so now it's the exam to get to the bar, I guess. So that's why it's the bar exam.
Interesting. Okay. All right.
That's yes. I might be wrong on that, but I'm 99% sure that's the origin of it.
Or it's just where you head right after you take it, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We in law school they have these things called bar reviews, which when you get in, you think that they're actually, we're going to review for the test or review for class, but no, actually you just go to the bar and drink.
Oh, funny. That's what college is for. So tell me a story about your process of going through school, law school, passing the bar, all that jazz.
Yeah, I was, always liked school and writing and things like that. So it was kind of a natural progression for me to go to law school. But going to law school it was a wake up call because the writing style for legal writing was very difficult from what my background was in history. So it took me a little bit of time to understand how to write like a lawyer, and that was a difficult process. And I had interesting experience with the bar exam. I actually, I know your podcast talks a lot about how the path to business isn't exactly linear. There's a lot of ups and downs.
Right.
And so, you know, like a lot of people, I had to take the bar exam a couple times and had just a disastrous experience one of those times. So I was taking the bar exam. I had applied for some accommodations because just it was for medical reasons, and they put me in a hotel. Usually, when you take the bar exam, you take it in a huge convention center with, you know, 3,000 people. This is in California. Other states, of course, differ, but in California, it's like 3,000 people, and you know, there's just a ton of people in there, but they put me in a hotel room. It was just like my personal hotel room. I had just asked for just small accommodations, like a different chair or something like that. But I guess they did the same thing to everybody. So I was at the DoubleTree by LAX, and you sit in a hotel room where they flip the bed up, and your desk is there, and they have one proctor for you. And so on the third day, I was feeling pretty good. It's a 3-day exam, 2 3-hour blocks of exam taking, and so it's very intense. It's about 18 hours, and they've shortened it since then to 2 days. But back when I took it, it was 3 days, and so you bring your own laptop, and I was feeling pretty good. You know, third day, you know, second day it was multiple choice. I was doing well, and so I get there and I bring my laptop out and I'm ready, and I open my laptop and I see, you know, hey, 4% battery, no big deal. Just plug it in and go. And then so I plugged my computer in, same way I did the past 2 days in the same room, and it didn't charge. And so at that point, I was like, oh no, this is very bad, because you know I type really quickly, and usually you have to write if you can't type, and something I wasn't used to. I said, you know what, this is okay. This happened to me in law school. I'm gonna write. It's not going to be a problem. And so I started writing, and halfway through the morning session, my pen ran out of ink.
Oh
And
no.
yeah, and it was just like I kind of chuckled to myself and said, you know, what else could happen? And I was like, oh, I have a second pen, no big deal. And literally 2 sentences into writing with the second pen, that pen died as well. And I was I kind of just sat there with my head on my hands, and the proctor lady was like, hey, what's wrong? You know, because she could tell. And I said, you know what, both my pens ran out of ink, and she knew about the computer already. And she said, okay, you know, I'm not allowed to do this, but just use my pen. So I said, okay, thank you so much. And you know, I have this plan now. I'm going to rush back home during lunch. I'm going to get my other charger. I'm going to come back. Everything's going to be fine. So I drove home, and LA traffic. Suddenly there was no traffic. It was like Moses had parted the Red Sea on the 405 freeway, and made it home. Got back, got my charger, and on the way back, I was starving. So I decided I was going to try to stop at McDonald's, and I see McDonald's has a line out the driveway. So I said, forget McDonald's. I'm going to go around, and as I'm going around to make a right to get back onto the main street, the guy in front of me goes at the stop sign. I look left and roll forward, and then bam, I hit the guy in front of me. And so I was like, this is like the first fender bender I've ever been in. And I was like, oh, well, you know, here's a real world example of what law school is going to, being a lawyer is going to be like. And so sat down or got out of the car, argued with this guy for about like 20 minutes, because he was trying to keep me there to take pictures and do all this stuff and exchange insurance. And it was just a little tap. And finally, after 20 minutes, I was able to get rid of him and go over back to the hotel where the test was, and still hadn't eaten anything. So I sat down, had some Asian short ribs, sticky ribs at the bar, which will come into play later, I promise. And one of the things they always tell you when you're taking a test like this, during the test, like on breaks and afterwards, you should never talk about the test itself, like what you had done. It's in the past already, forget about it. But unfortunately, I got drawn into a conversation about the previous test. So now with that car accident, with the disgusting food, with this is all in my head. And I get back to the room where the test is taken. And I said, okay, I got 3 more hours to go. And I sit down, I plug everything in, and I open the computer, and it didn't work. And so all of that, you know, car accident and all that kind of stuff was kind of for nothing. And so I just, you know, at that point, I just sat down and took a deep breath, went to the bathroom, threw up the Asian sticky ribs.
Oh no.
Completely just barfed my guts out from the stress. And I think that was a huge moment for me at that point when I sat back down, because I had always been one of those people that, you know, as a kid, when I played video games, if I was about to lose, you know, I would restart. I would never take the loss, you know.
Okay.
Yeah. I was just one of those people, you know, always restart it, always would get super mad if I lost and not want to deal with it, and just kind of just give up. And I sat there and I said, you know what? I've always been that kid, and I thought about that video game example, and I've always been that kid, but I'm going to put a stop to it right now. I might have a 1% chance of passing the test, but I'll have a 0% chance if I leave. And so, I just sat down and I just finished it and took care of it. And really, I kind of felt better about myself that I did that. But got back to the car after the test, sat in my car for about 45 minutes and just in shock. I couldn't cry, I couldn't do anything. I just sat there. And finally, after about 45 minutes, I drove home for half an hour and just out of curiosity, I decided to see what would happen with the chargers. And both chargers worked when I got home.
Nice.
That was a tough one, but I ended up learning a lot of lessons from that. Like I said, it was a make or break moment just to sit down and not for the test, because unfortunately I didn't pass that time, but I ended up being so close to passing that I said, with all of that I went through, the next time is going to be fine. And thankfully, the next time I did pass, but that was something that affected me for a long time, kind of going through all of that and the car accident and the food and this and that. So it was a kind of a tough journey to get to being an attorney. And then it just gets worse after that.
Oh, nice. So I've always been curious, what kind of questions do they have on the bar? Is it scenarios? Or are they just asking you like, how can you make this one legible sentence be essentially unreadable? Or like, how do you turn it into lawyer speak? What do you do?
Well, in California, you would get when I was taking the bar, I think it's similar now. You get 3 prompts and you have 3 hours, and then you spend as much time as you want on each prompt, but it's better to break it down in an hour. But it gives you about a page of facts. So these facts could be from any different type of area of law. It could be like a landlord-tenant situation where, say, like somebody's renting a room from somebody, and then the person keeps turning on the cold water in the kitchen when the other roommate is in the shower and scalding them with hot water. What do you do there? Other things is, there'd be an example of somebody dies and ends up leaving everything to their caretaker. And the children come in, and then you have to discuss, well, was there undue influence? Is the will something that you can rescind and things like that? So they'll take an area of law and just write a fact pattern. Somebody built a fence on your property, things like that. What do you do? And then every state has to take the NPRE, which is the multiple choice section of the bar. And so you'll have another fact pattern that's probably like 4 or 5 sentences long, and then they give you 5 options on what you can do, 4 or 5 options. So things like that. So it's all based on real world situations, but you don't use the specific law of the state. There is a kind of a legal fiction called common law, which is kind of just from England. It's like judge-made law on how things just were done, and you use this kind of legal fiction, this average of what the laws are like all around the country, and that's the law set that you use. So you don't actually learn the specific laws of the state you're in while you're in law school. And so once you get out of law school, then you have to learn the whole body of law that you're going to start practicing.
Interesting. So when you are writing your answer for the bar, are you citing common law, or do you have access to common law, or you're just like,
you gotta
I
memorize
think common law says this, or how does that work?
You memorize it. You memorize the rules for everything. And so let's say you're doing a torts case, and torts is things like assault and battery and kidnapping and things to another person's person, I guess, is the best way. And so you would say, like, if the fact pattern is like Bill hit Jim, what are the causes of action here? You would say, well, first the issue is whether or not Jim hit Bill is illegal, and is battery, and then you give the rule. Battery is a touching of another without consent, or that is offensive or harmful. And so you have to break down each element. Well, what does harmful mean? What does offensive mean? What is it touching? And so you go through those things. And again, you have to have all those things memorized. And for things like easements and property law, you have to know all the different parts. And so It's a lot of memorization. But then you got to apply the memorization. So that's where the difficulty really comes in.
That sounds rough. I'm glad to pay other people to do that, I guess.
Well, I'm glad.
Maybe not glad, but yeah, I guess I'm just glad there's other people that are willing to do that, I guess, as far as that goes.
Yeah, it's a necessary evil, unfortunately.
So you do a fair amount of business law and business consulting. Let's go down that road. Tell me, what are the typical things, let's just say top 3, top 5 things that you typically see small business owners doing as far as mistakes go, legal mistakes that could lead to big expensive problems that you'll have to be involved in later, I guess, as far as that goes.
Yeah, of course. I think the big thing that small business owners will forget about is having a company handbook.
Oh,
And yeah, a lot of times that's something that you'll talk to a small business owner and you'll ask about their policies and procedures and things like that, and you'll say, okay, well, do you have a company handbook? And most of them say no. And then I'll do like a if I'm at a conference and I'm speaking to some people, I always start out with a little interactive part, and I say, how many of you have a company handbook? And maybe half the small business owners will raise their hand, and then my follow-up is, well, of those who do have a company handbook, how many of you actually read it? And most nobody ever raises their hand. And it's something that a lot of people, they'll download from their like payroll processor, or their work comp insurance will give them a copy. And in the handbook, it's supposed to be how everything works at your company, discipline, late policy, bereavement policy, pregnancy leave, all these important things. Your policies on time, on how long lunch is, and these are really important to have up front so your employees know what to expect. Because a big problem business owners have is that if they try to discipline one of their employees and they don't have a company handbook that shows exactly what the discipline procedure is, you get people like employees saying like, wait, I didn't know that. That's not fair. You didn't do that when, so-and-so was late, or you didn't write them up. And so it exposes like inconsistency in the way that you run your business. And it really, I mean, well, I won't say it pees them off, but it really makes employees angry when things are done inconsistently in a business, especially when it comes to employee relations from management and ownership.
yeah, you got to have the rules of the game laid out. Otherwise, it's like you're playing a game with a 5-year-old and the 5-year-old keeps changing the rules.
Exactly. And
Like, that's not what we're doing. Right?
you're
So
100%
yeah,
right.
you got to have the rules laid out.
And
Interesting. All right,
yeah,
what else?
clock in, clock out procedure. But this is really important in California. So in California, every employee is guaranteed, if you work an 8-hour shift, you're guaranteed 2 10-minute breaks that are on the clock, and then you get a 1/2 an hour off the clock lunch if you're working hourly. And so what people have to do is clock out for lunch and clock back in. And if you don't have a full 30 minutes, or your lunch is interrupted, or you can't leave your workplace to go have lunch, that's not considered a lunch. And you're supposed to pay an hour penalty, like anytime one of your employees doesn't get a full 30 minutes for lunch. And so that adds up really quickly, because a lot of companies, they don't monitor their employees' lunch breaks correctly. And so an employee can leave and have taken their lunches. They could even have hour lunches, but if you don't have that on paper showing these clock in, clock outs, and that they have a full 30 minutes, you're risking a lawsuit from the employee. And if you have 2 employees or something like that, it's not going to get that expensive. You owe them an hour of their hourly pay. But if you have like 500 employees and they're all missing their lunches for 3 years, or not getting full lunches, you're in a lot of trouble at that point.
Yeah.
There's fees and things like that. So those are probably the 2 biggest: not having a handbook, and then the not checking the lunches. But I mean, that's a full-time job, just having somebody check the clock in and out for lunches for a big company. And it's something that is very, very common. And I would say the third thing that becomes a huge problem for companies is dealing with employees' disabilities. And an employee will come to a business owner or a manager or supervisor or something like that and say, I have asthma or something like that, or I have a back problem, I can't sit for a certain period of time, and it's affecting my ability to do the work. And so, they'll have a doctor's note and the doctor will make some recommendations. But at that point, it's really important for a company to sit down and try to figure out with the employee how to address this disability. Because if you do it the wrong way, and if you basically get rid of somebody or fire somebody for having a disability because it makes it, say, just inconvenient for you as a business owner, or hey, if I buy this person a chair, I'm going to have to buy 50 other chairs for everybody else, and this kind of stubbornness. Well, the law doesn't back you up on that stubbornness, and that you're going to have a big problem going to court, because when it comes to disabilities, people are very they're sensitive about their disabilities. They're very passionate about having their disabilities validated, having their disabilities just understood by their employers. And if it's not, that's one of the things that's going to cause them to go out and have the energy to want to first look for a lawyer and then go through a lawsuit, because that's something that really does take a lot of energy and time, and really only extremely motivated and angry people are usually the ones who seek out lawyers. So my advice to business owners is understand what your employees are having difficulty with, and really try to address it and validate what they're saying, of course, to a point, not to bend over backwards, but at least within the law. Because when you have an angry employee and when you have one that doesn't feel like they've been heard, those are the people who are going to find an attorney and sue you.
So tell me, I've always been curious about this. I guess the business that I run with the call answering service, as far as I know, for the most part, we haven't run into it, or I know that we haven't run into an issue like this, but I'm certain that something could happen. With states that are right to work, where an employee can leave for whatever reason and an employer can fire them for whatever reason, how does the employee, the angry ex-employee, prove that the employer fired them because of whatever?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. It's so dependent on exactly what the facts are. A lot of times you're going to need witnesses, other employees, which can be very difficult, because other employees, I mean, you have work friends, but work friends doesn't necessarily translate when your work friend is now suing the company and asking you to put your neck on the line by being a witness for them in a lawsuit. So that does become very, very difficult, because there's so much circumstantial evidence when it comes to this kind of stuff.
So the burden of proof is on the employee that they were essentially discriminated against, or is it on the employer to prove that they didn't discriminate?
No, it's initially on the employee to prove that they were discriminated against or harassed or retaliated against. So you might have a situation where you tell your boss, hey, listen, I have really bad anxiety. I've been diagnosed. I'm seeing a psychiatrist, and the extra work that you're putting on me, is not something I can handle at the moment without some sort of accommodations. So let's say the conversation ends there. The boss says, okay, we're going to talk to HR. We're going to talk to our general counsel, and we'll see what we can do for you. And then a week later, the employee comes in 5 minutes late and they say you're fired. In a case like that, of course, the company is going to argue, well, hey, they were late 5 minutes, so we had to fire them. It's an at-will state. We can fire you for any reason. And usually, absent the situation with the asking for accommodations for the anxiety, that wouldn't be a problem at all. You could tell someone, like, I just don't like you. I don't want to work with you. You're fired. Just like you were saying, it's a right to work at will. But if there's a situation like a week before, where the employee really went up to the supervisor and said they have like a disability, that's going to be likely enough evidence, a week later, that they got fired, that it's tied to them talking about their disability. Then kind of dig a little deeper. Had they been late before? What is their discipline history? All this kind of stuff. Who else got fired for being late? And there's a lot that goes into it. And these things are, of course, get very complicated. But yeah, sometimes it has to deal with a lot of circumstantial evidence. On the other hand, if you're doing wage and hour stuff, not the company not giving lunches to the employees for a full 30 minutes, or employees missing lunches, that's going to be on the clock in, clock out records. So that's a little bit easier to prove, because you could just look at the records and it's like, oh, well, I see he doesn't have a lunch on this day, this day, this day, or it was late this day. So that's a little bit more cut and dry and easier to do. But also the payout is a lot less, because if you're dealing with lunches and for one employee,
Mhm.
it might be $1,000 or something like that. So, it's not necessarily something that's going to break a company, but those things lead to class action lawsuits. Like if you have one employee who's missing lunch or late for lunch, and let's say they work on a line with 100 other people in a manufacturing plant, you're likely going to see that one individual lawsuit get evolved into a class action, because you can make the assumption that everybody else is being treated the same way. So that's something that you don't necessarily need as much proof, but you'll get asked for it. They'll, the company will say, well, even though it's not on paper, we have 13 witnesses who say every day we stop the line at the same time and everybody goes into the lunchroom. So, that's the back and forth that you'll have on that. So,
Gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting with the lunch thing because we have the same rule for every employee, right? You got to take your 30-minute lunch if you are scheduled to work over 6 hours.
yes,
And so we'd have some employees that are just like, I'm only going to work six, but then they end up working 6 hours and 15 minutes. And I got to go there and say, like, hey, we're talking like fractions of a second over 6 hours means you got to take a lunch. So
yes.
we got to schedule you for 5.5 because you may have to take 5 extra minutes to button up your stuff. I mean, that's the game that we got to play. We like you're playing by the state's rules or federal rules, whatever they are.
It's very difficult. It's really difficult, and to be completely compliant, it's almost impossible. You can go from like a mom and pop like shoe shining service to Amazon with warehouses that are like 3 miles long, and you're going to be able to uncover problems with wage and hour stuff in almost every single company, because it's almost impossible not to be out of compliance as a business.
Yeah, the challenging part, I guess, that I've seen, and I imagine other businesses are similar, is I, as a business owner, am not actively trying to break the law. I'm trying to get the employees to follow the law. And it's the employees that are not following the law. But I'm like,
Yes.
but I get in trouble for that. So I'm like, here's the rules. We got to follow the rules. And some employees, I guess, often just take that as a recommendation, not a this has to happen kind of thing, which is
And so, yeah,
frustrating.
that's a very frustrating thing for business owners. And this is one thing that we always have to address with companies that do like logistics. And you have to have a manager or be a manager who is willing to tell the employee, like, hey, I noticed you missed your lunch. I understand that you want to work through lunch or whatever, but you have to take your lunch. And at that point, in your handbook, it should say something like, if employee, misses their lunches, they cannot miss more than a certain amount of lunches, because those lead to penalties that you have to pay.
Mhm.
It's the same thing. It's like if somebody decided, well, I worked 20 hours overtime this week because I wanted to get my work done faster, and that only benefits the company. But that's something you have to tell them, like, listen, we don't want you working overtime. It's not authorized. And so, yeah, you actually would have to discipline an employee who wanted to work through lunch by telling them, listen, you have to do this. This is just part of it. We don't want to pay you an extra hour's worth
Right.
for so
Typically,
yeah,
those
that
employees, though, they're not working through lunch. They're just punched in. So
yeah,
little,
yeah,
a
that's
little bit different.
and yeah,
Typically the good employees, you don't have to worry about stuff like that because that's what part of what makes them good employees.
yes, exactly. And you don't want to be a babysitter as a business owner.
No.
That's one of the hardest things. You're not running a kindergarten. You don't want to check that everybody's coloring within the lines, and you have your shoes tied and all those kinds of things. But because of the way that the laws are run and written, it makes it really, really difficult for businesses to be compliant.
Fair, totally fair. It's interesting. I had a business. Well, I guess I sold the company to him. And he would always tell me when it comes to hiring employees, he said the one rule is no projects. So if they come to you with any baggage at all, just
Yeah,
keep looking
absolutely.
because you always have this thing like, oh, we can work around that, this whatever minor little thing. But he's like, no, that'll end up just destroying you or take way more time than you want it to. Or, I mean, just you can go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, so
Yeah,
it's
I totally agree. And those are the type of people who kind of think outside the box and quickly think outside the box when something goes wrong to go see an attorney.
right.
Because they're the ones who get mad. They have these ideas. You should run your business like this, and yeah, I mean, as an employee, it's not necessarily appropriate to be doing that stuff. So yeah, you really have to look at the people and the person and their personalities that work for you, and kind of see like what is going to cause a problem for me. Is this person going to be difficult? Is this going to be an issue? And look for those red flags, because like I said, people, they sue because they get passionate about something that they're angry about. They feel like they were treated unfairly, and they get very passionate. So those are the types of things that you want to nip in the bud, and really just be like, listen, I'm the manager. This is how we're doing things. I appreciate your ideas, but let's just go with the flows. We do what the handbook says. We do exactly what we need to do to be compliant, and not cut any corners, because the alternative of getting caught for cutting those corners is really going to cost your business a lot.
Right. Right. Tell me, are there other HR places where, I mean, I imagine a million other HR places where businesses commonly, or that you see routinely, make mistakes where you're just like, oh, this was a simple error, but the repercussions sometimes for a simple error are way out of proportion?
Honestly, every single little thing in a business can be bad. Just dealing with the employees is the number one thing. I think just understanding that employees now kind of expect more of an explanation. They expect that if they're going to get fired, it's going to be for a good reason. They want to have things explained to them. They don't just want to kind of blindly, do what the boss says. I think there has been a kind of a shift where a lot of people, they don't like the idea that there's a hierarchy in place.
Mm-hmm.
At work, and they do have a problem with that. So just being able to talk to your employees and talk about why they're being disciplined, or what's going on, or why they need to stop doing things, has become really, really important in the workplace. Whereas before, you would just tell someone, well, if you don't like it, get out. But now, they're going to get out, and the first thing they're going to do is look for an attorney. The attorney might not take their case, but still, I mean, you don't want to deal with something like that, because they could go to an attorney complaining about something small, and then, like, let's say they're a truck driver. They're complaining about something small, like, hey, I got fired because this guy said I was ugly, which is fine. You could fire somebody and tell them that, it's that, well, or I don't like you. But you find out as the attorney, when you're talking to them, that all the drivers use their personal cell phone for work. Like
Oh,
they call their personal cell phone. There's 500 drivers. Well, guess what? This person who you made angry for something like completely unrelated has just told an attorney a great reason for a class action lawsuit against your company. So yeah, I think those are the small things that could pop up that you don't even realize that you're doing. Like, hey, what's the big deal? I called them on their cell phone. We talked to them for 2 seconds. It's 3 minutes. It doesn't even cost them anything extra. But that's not how the law looks at it, unfortunately. The law looks at it as, now you're taking advantage of these employees by making them pay for a cell phone that they use for work. So,
oh, interesting.
when you look at it that way, it makes a lot of sense, from the law's perspective, because, this is a business shifting their costs onto their employee, which they shouldn't be doing. But if you're just talking to somebody, a man on the street, and say, hey, would you sue your boss because he called you on your cell phone? 99% of people would say no.
Right.
But
Yeah. Oh, so you expect your boss to call you.
yeah, exactly. Hey, hey, listen, I know you're out today, or I know you're off site, but hey, do you know where this file is? Something like that.
Yeah.
Completely innocuous. But again, when in the aggregate, when you're calling 500 drivers, or 500 people, in a farm, or something like that, on their own cell phones, then it becomes something where the business is taking advantage of their employees.
Interesting. Interesting. Tell me, what are some of the other things you have as far as advice for entrepreneurs from a legal standpoint?
Um, well, just speak to a lawyer when you first start. Speak to a lawyer, find out what you need to do. It's probably going to cost you about, maybe 250 to 500 bucks, depending where you are. But find out, get like a checklist of all the things that you need to do. Get a company handbook. Start an LLC to make sure that you're legally protected, and you're not personally liable for things that go wrong with the business. Get insurance. That's a huge one. Get insurance. So many times people come in and say, this and this happened to me. And I say, well, do you have insurance? No. Well, that's the thing that people need to understand, is that having a business costs a lot of money.
It
Um,
does.
in general, to
It
protect
does.
yourself. Because
Insurance just blows my mind because we have general insurance on the business. And I'm like, the likelihood that something would happen where insurance would come into play for a call answering business, whatever, has got to be so minimal that every time we send that check to them, the insurance company's got to be like, we suckered them again every
absolutely,
time.
absolutely. And
But
99% of the time that's the case. You're probably never going to get the value out of your insurance policy that you pay every month. But crazy things happen. I mean, one example, when I was first working, somebody had sold a car, but didn't take their name off of the title. So of course the person who was driving it, they were insured. They were insured. The car was insured, but the person who originally owned the car, whose name was still on the title, was not insured on the car. So now they were personally liable in an accident that happened.
oh, all right.
So things like that you wouldn't expect. A delivery guy comes to your call center and slips because one of your employees spilled coffee. That's something that you're going to have to deal with. And for an insurance company to deal with somebody going to the ER or something is not a big deal. It's not going to cost them that much money, and they're going to be able to handle it. But yeah, if delivery guy slips and hands you a bill for the hospital bill, and it's like $15,000 for a broken arm or something like that, that's really going to hurt a business owner, and you're going to wish that you were paying for the insurance. So
Right.
yeah, insurance is huge.
Fair. Tell me, as far you mentioned LLCs, can you describe, I guess, where an attorney would fit in as far as LLCs? I don't know if S corporations, corporations, trusts, is that attorney type stuff or is that more accountant stuff?
It's both. It's
Okay.
definitely both. I think attorney will be able to help you understand why you need one in terms of legal protection. Because if you don't have a corporation or a partnership like an LLC, you're going to be personally liable for anything that goes wrong connected to the business. So if you have an LLC, you're protected, but finding out which one is going to benefit you the most for tax purposes, that's something that you need to talk to a CPA about. Because there's different tax schemes related to an S corp versus an LLC or a C corp. Different tax advantages, pass-throughs, and all these things that I'm not smart enough to discuss because, like I said, numbers are not my thing. But yeah, you should talk to a CPA and a lawyer to figure out the best way. And you can have a lawyer file with the Secretary of State to get an LLC, but it's also something that people can do themselves.
All right.
The bar will probably kill me for saying that, but yeah,
Ha!
if you have the wherewithal to be able to start a business, you have the wherewithal to be able to go on the Secretary of State website and sign up for your own LLC, and it's usually not a big deal. And you don't have to sign one in Delaware. Everybody wants a Delaware LLC and stuff like that, but in most cases, your own state is going to be fine to start an LLC through your own Secretary of State.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I guess I started looking into that when is it Tesla? Tesla was whatever registered in Delaware and they're moving out of there because they got upset about whatever. And I started digging into that, and it's interesting how different states have different things. California, I think it's $800 or something like that. It's
Yeah.
psycho. Where I'm in Wisconsin, it's $150 or something like that one time, and then annually $20. I was like, California's annually $800. Like it's that's almost, well, I guess I wouldn't even say almost. That is cost prohibitive if you have a hobby business, but you still want to be protected, or you're not
Yeah.
necessarily making crazy money on it or something like that. Maybe you're just selling your little knit sweaters or whatever. Like some of these companies might not even make revenue wise $800.
Yeah, absolutely. And California, it's a very difficult place to do business because of all the regulations, but it's also a place that draws so many people and so many tourists and has such a huge population that California is basically saying like, yeah, this environment that we created for you to make money, you're going to have to pay into it, and you're going to have to pay your piece. And cities like, Beverly Hills is a great example. If you want to do business in Beverly Hills, you have to bend over backwards to do business in Beverly Hills because Beverly Hills
Oh,
is saying, we have this reputation as a city, we're rich, we're fancy, we're elegant, we're all this kind of stuff. And if you open a business there, you are kind of inheriting those characteristics in your business. And Beverly Hills is saying you're going to have to pay for the fact that we keep the streets clean, that the landscaping is perfect everywhere, that crime is low, all these things. And so California is pretty much saying the same thing. Like, hey, you could be in North Dakota, and pay $50 for your LLC, but you're not going to be having any business, and it's going to be a lot different environment in terms of the protections you have and the things that the state, purportedly would do for you, because getting California to do anything for you as a business owner is very difficult.
So tell me a story. If let's just say you're doing business in California, can you make an LLC in whatever, let's just say Wyoming, and then move on with your life? Or what are the rules as far as making an LLC in a different state than what you're actually either based in or doing business in, or anything like that?
Well, it does get a little bit complicated, and the type of business and what you're doing, but in most cases, you're able to start an LLC in a different state. You need to have an agent for process. So if you're sued, or the state needs to send you any mail, it can go to an address where they can reach you in that state in most cases. But you're free to do so. But like I said, in most cases, it just makes more sense to do it in your own state. It's just going to be easier.
All right. Interesting. Yeah, it's I don't know. I just made my LLCs in Wisconsin and just move on with my life. And I just started digging into, like, wait, why would you do Delaware, or why would you do New Mexico, Las Vegas, or I'm sorry, not Las Vegas, but Nevada, different things. I was told, even, it's interesting, we used to have a payroll company, and during pandemic, we ended up having employees all over the country. And the payroll company, and this is all that they do, is just payroll and health insurance, essentially. I offered a job to an employee or potential employee in California, and I sent that person's information to the payroll company, and they're like, yeah, no, we won't pay anybody in California. And it was one of those things, like, what's the big deal? I mean, they're a couple thousand miles away. We got these people in New York, Florida, Texas, whatever. And they're like, yeah, no, California's got these rules. We just won't hire work with anybody in California.
It's
really, I felt bad, because then I had to call the girl, and I'm like, hey, I'm sorry, we can't hire you because I don't have a way to pay you.
Yeah, California, they don't, it's almost like they don't want to do anything with other states, or have anything to do with the other states, business wise, legal wise, especially legal wise. So most states, if you pass the bar, say in New York, it's something called the reciprocity agreement. So if I pass the bar in New York, I'm automatically going to be able to practice in, like, New Jersey, Connecticut, and surrounding states. A lot of states have, if you pass the bar in Nevada, you could practice in New Mexico or Arizona, but not in California. Because California doesn't want people passing the bar, say in Arizona, where it's a lot easier, and then coming to California
and then transferring. Okay.
So they don't want that to happen. And that has been kind of to the detriment a little bit to California in certain senses. There's not a lot of international law business here, because a lot of the international law firms are based in New York or DC, and they want to open up an office here. But there's a famous case, I think about 20 years ago. Well, famous is a relative term, but a New York firm was doing business in California. They had a California office. They had California licensed attorneys working that office, but they weren't, like, home base in California, and they were doing international law with China and Japan, and they got fined $350 million from the California bar. And they'll get the heck out of here. We don't want, non-California firms doing business here like that. And so, yeah, it's a very, very kind of competitive and protectionist state, California, in a lot of ways. But I mean, you can still make a lot of money here despite that.
All right.
It's difficult. I mean, the bar is high, but the payout can also be very high, just because of the amount of customers and just the amount of people here and opportunities.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you have incredibly nice weather. It's pretty out there, so I totally get that. It was just interesting. I think at the time, it was I want to say middle of pandemic where California was locked down. So this girl, she was 23, 24. I don't know. She was younger. It was one of those like the state was saying essentially you can't go anywhere to work. So you have to work from home. But it was also telling me, or I was being told, you can't hire anyone from California to work from home. So
Yeah,
I'm like, oh, this girl's in a bad spot.
yeah,
She just wants
definitely.
to work and she's not able to. Or at least not from anyone that doesn't have business in California, which was peculiar.
It's just, I think for the payroll company, it's just very difficult. The payroll company probably was not, maybe they didn't weren't licensed in California or weren't set up there, or it was just, it's too much hassle to do business there for them.
Yeah. It was
They
a
didn't have
they
a lot of,
yeah, they ended up giving me a list of I think 5 states that they wouldn't pay people in. They're just
oh,
like,
wow.
don't they gave me because after I was like, what do you mean you can't pay them? You're a payroll company. This is what you do. And they're like, yeah, no. And they started to give a reason why, and then they gave me I think 4 other states that they're like the headache of doing business in those states is too high, and there's plenty of other employees in other states, so there's no need.
Yeah,
So
I can definitely see a business doing that. Yeah, because if you're not in California already, it's just not worth setting up over here if you're not going to have a ton of business.
yeah, I think if memory serves, I believe that California was set up where you had to set up a business, so that was an $800 a year thing. And this, I mean, this girl would have been part time, whatever. So like that $800 is probably a month pay for, I guess, a part time, whatever, 15, 20 hours a week, whatever.
And then you're also going to be subject to all the California employment laws,
Mm-hmm.
which are a lot stricter. So yeah, I mean, if I was a business owner out of the state, I would want nothing to do with the California wage and hour and employment laws. Just
Yeah.
forget.
And it's funny you say that because I had no idea. I didn't even realize. I guess this is just me admitting to a little bit of ignorance here, or quite a bit of ignorance. I had no idea that other states had different laws, employment laws, hour, wage. I mean, I figured the minimum wage, I guess, comes into play with different states, but we're paying above that, so it's not an issue. But the breaks, the lunches, the PTO, all that other stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a full time job just keeping track of all that just to figure out what states we can hire people in.
Yeah, and you know what? The California system doesn't even necessarily reflect like a lot of I guess the values that people have in other states. I think because California is so big and there's just more opportunity for the boss not to know the employees in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Because you hear a lot like in the South. I was talking to other attorneys and stuff like that. There's more of a understanding that you're gonna help your boss if you have to stay a little bit 20-30 minutes after to load something up in your boss's store or something like that. You're going to do it and you're not going to go ahead and sue them for that or expect them to be paying you overtime because you're thankful that you have the job and you want to help this person and just as in your own moral kind of morality, it's the right thing to do, just to lend somebody a hand that is helping you. And I totally agree with that. I don't think, people should necessarily be breathing down their boss's neck for, a couple bucks of overtime or something like that. But it just becomes a problem on a large scale.
Right.
So that's what California is trying to address because, California has huge employers in Central California with agriculture, a lot of logistics and drivers and shipping and all these different industries that have tons and tons of employees where it's not this relationship between like a boss who's like a father figure to a small group of employees or something like that where these types of we're not going to worry about this 20 minutes or hey, I'm going to skip lunch day becomes like a legal threat like in the
Mm-hmm.
way in California where it's like, well, yeah, these construction workers have not been getting their lunches and have been forced to work through their lunch. That's a much different situation where they don't want to do that. They're not looking to do that. They've been working for 5 hours straight. Where's my lunch? That's a very different situation. So, a lot of it is kind of the examples that people bring up as well can really color the way that you look at the laws. Because you can easily find examples where the employee get sympathy, but then switch it around and you notice that, well, employers deserve a little bit of sympathy as well. And in California, it doesn't seem like that's the case compared to other places.
That's fair. That's fair. It almost seems like it's built or designed to make it an us versus them,
Yeah.
employer versus employee. You
Yeah.
remind me of a time, this is decades ago. I was working for an alarm company and we had to install a camera in some high school or something like that on a light pole. So we had to dig a ditch. So I'm digging this ditch, and the employer comes in his truck and throws a coworker of mine some McDonald's, whatever trash, the little Big Mac thing. And so we eat that, and then we keep digging, right? So we ate for whatever 5 minutes, and I look at my paycheck, and I was missing some time, and I looked, and he deducted 30 minutes for lunch that day. And I'm like, dude, we were in like 90-degree heat digging this ditch. We never left that ditch. And he's like, you ate lunch? I'm like, oh, this guy.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was a week or two later, I just left.
Yeah.
I
And I
didn't
don't,
feel like suing him or anything like that over a lunch or anything, but it was one of those like, we can be done.
yeah, absolutely. I think you did the right thing by leaving, because that's really the only other thing you can do other than sue is just kind of protest the behavior like that, because that's what a lot of employers do. It's like, hey man, you had your lunch. Well, I didn't go anywhere for lunch. I just
Right.
5 minutes, next to this light pole, and you were talking to me about what we were supposed to be doing
Mm-hmm.
the next 20 minutes or the next few hours the whole time I was eating my Big Mac. How is that a lunch? You
Yeah.
know,
So I figured like he thought, or in his mind, right? He pays $5 for lunch for each of us. And then he saves himself whatever, 15, $20 each employee. Is probably like, oh, I should do this every day.
exactly. Or they owe me how I owe I'm out there getting them lunch and
Yeah.
great.
Working so hard.
Yeah,
Sitting in
they're
that drive through.
yeah, exactly. And so yeah, and but people will really, employers, they will get very stubborn about that kind of stuff and feel like they're owed. But man, your employees don't owe you anything other than the work they're contracted to do. And you owe them for that time that they put in. Asking them for anything else, or forcing them, I should say, to do anything else, that's really it's inappropriate. It's really taking advantage of people, and those kind of soft examples of like you just said are prevalent everywhere, and really, people are getting millions and millions and millions of dollars stolen from them every year like this.
Mm-hmm.
And it really adds up, because you got to think, like, there's probably 100 other employers just like that guy, just within 10 miles of where you were at that time,
Oh,
doing
yeah.
this thing. And people just kind of not wanting to say anything because they don't want to get fired and they don't want to seem like complainers.
Yeah. Counter to that, I mean, there's employees, like I said, where they just punch in and don't necessarily work. So
Yeah.
I think it certainly cuts both ways.
Oh,
But
absolutely. Nobody is the good guy in this. There,
right.
there's no
Fair.
good guy, there's no bad guy, there's nothing like that where you can say that one side is taking advantage of the other. It's going to be happening on both sides. And like in California, I guess California, the state just basically takes the hit in terms of being the bad guy for everybody.
Sure.
But it's interesting because California has these very, very strict laws on wage and hour, but the effect has been that they don't get enforced, because
Oh.
yeah, what's happened in California is that the legislature made these super, super strict laws. That if the employee gets 29 minutes, you have to pay them a penalty of 1 hour because it's not considered their full lunch. And so to make this something that companies took seriously and not just tried, if they got sued for $5,000, which is such a small amount for a big company, that they could just, ignore it and ignore it and ignore it because the plaintiff's attorney probably is not going to make a big deal over $5,000 and put on a huge case. If you win at trial as an employee, you're even $1, your attorney would have the right to ask for attorney's fees from the court. So as an attorney, I can win a case for $1. It goes to the jury sides with me. Hey, they missed one lunch one time, that's the law, and they didn't want to settle and pay the hours worth. I can ask for, say, $100,000 in attorney's fees at that point. And
Oh.
That's not what's supposed to happen. It's just supposed to incentivize the companies to settle faster, when they get a $2,000, $3,000 claim. But what happened during COVID was these laws kind of started getting, what's the way? I wouldn't say popular, but you started to see a lot of these lawsuits. And COVID, everything slowed down. The courts got shut down, and all of a sudden, judges are seeing half their docket, which is already twice as full as it should be, is taken up by these small employment claims for like $4,000, $5,000, that are supposed to be paid quickly, and they're not going away. And so the judges don't enforce the laws the way they're supposed to. And so you'll get a situation where I would be in a mediation with my client. My client was owed, say, like $35,000 in overtime, missed breaks, and missed lunches. And by their count, they say, I never got lunch, I never. And we asked for the records from the company, which they're legally required to send us, and the company won't send the records. And so you don't have so you don't have the exact numbers, and you get into a mediation, and the judge says, okay, what are you asking for? Or the attorney, the mediator, and so, what are you asking for? I said, okay, well, we have $35,000 worth of missed lunches and overtime. Well, where's your proof? Well, they never sent us the records. Well, so you don't have proof? Well, they didn't send us the records. We just told you. And, it's supposed to be an assumption against the company that my client is telling the truth, about this kind of stuff, because they now have the burden to show that they did give the lunches. Well, then the judge will say, well, you don't have any proof. Do you have witnesses? Well, nobody's going to testify in the court, against the company that they're working for. So no, I don't have witnesses. And I said, well, then you don't have a case.
All right.
It's not necessarily true. By law, you have a case here, but in practicality, the judges don't want to deal with these cases. The mediators don't want to deal with these cases. They want to deal with cases that are worth $250,000, $300,000 or more. These small cases. So what has happened is that there's such a distaste from the courts and the mediators and arbitrators for these types of cases that you bring these cases, and it's just not worth it. They've created an artificially high burden that's higher than the burden that the law actually has. But these are the gatekeepers of the law. So,
gotcha. Okay.
Like I said, this is kind of it's kind of like a quiet rebellion against the California legislature. The courts are saying to the legislature, listen, you made these laws so broad, and they can catch anybody, and that's not necessarily what the laws are supposed to do. It's in a sense, it's like speeding, where it says the limit is 55, but everybody does 65, 75, because that's just what's normal. Everybody legally could get a ticket, but that just doesn't happen because the courts would get completely filled up. There's not enough cops to give everybody tickets, and just practically. So it's a similar situation with kind of wage and hour stuff like this, where the courts themselves don't like how the legislature has dealt with the problem.
All right. Interesting.
Yeah, it's funny. It's an unintended consequence. They wanted to protect these people, and ended up that the legislative ideas that they brought and the laws that they passed made it actually harder for these people to get help.
Interesting. And so, I guess when I listen to stuff like this, I just think, what is wrong with the employee just getting a different job? If you don't like where you're working or the rules of the game there, it's not like there's no other jobs available.
And that's what the law thinks too. The law is basically like, that's why it's at will. If you don't like what's going on, leave. Because I get a lot of people who come in and say they're being bullied at work. I'm getting bullied, hostile work environment. And that could be a thing. If it's based on discrimination, if you're getting bullied because you're Asian, that's a problem. If you're getting bullied because you work too slow, bullied, quote unquote, because you work too slow, and your manager, well, I'll ask the client, well, what do you mean you're getting bullied? Well, I have to do the work of two people, and my manager, he likes the other guy better than he likes me, and they always talk to each other, and after work they hang out, and they tell me that I work too slow, and that I'm stupid, and I don't know what I'm doing. And I say, you know what, you got to go find a new job. There's nothing I can do for you there. That's kind of how the law looks at it. Yeah, this is a bad place to work, so go work somewhere else.
Yeah, for that person, take responsibility.
Exactly. But the problem is, in a place like California, if you're working, you're making 20 bucks an hour, you're basically paycheck to paycheck in California. If you're living in the LA or Orange County area, if you want a 2-bedroom apartment anywhere, within, I would say anywhere from LA to San Diego, 2-bedroom apartment average is going to be like 2,500 bucks,
Right.
for not to be in a great place. So if you're making 40 grand a year, you're like, wait a minute, what if it takes me a month and a half to find a job? You're going to burn through your savings
Oh,
and
sure.
you're going to be screwed. And because of how expensive rent is, how expensive groceries are, how expensive insurance is. I mean, insurance in California for cars is skyrocketing. Home insurance costs are skyrocketing. So everything becomes so expensive that you end up kind of getting tied down to your job more than what a healthy functioning economy would really kind of think a typical employee would be tied down to their job. There's in practicality a lot less ability to move around to jobs because of how expensive everything is and how little savings people have than what was the forethought of kind of capitalist working society that is working in the way it's intended to work.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, it's a tough place. Nice place to visit.
Nice place to visit. Yeah, for a few days, it's great. I'm from here. I'm kind of stuck here, so I would not tell people to move here. And people moving here is one of the reasons it's so expensive too, especially in LA. You get a lot of people who move here for the movie industry
Mm.
and move to like certain parts of LA, and they're people overestimate how much money they're going to make in the future. Like they say, I'm going to get to LA, within a couple months, I'll probably have a job. I'll be making, 50, 60 grand a year. Won't be a problem for me, to find a place and this and that. But, a lot of times it doesn't turn out that way. But these people coming in with these expectations of getting paid a lot more than what they necessarily will on average means that there's always somebody willing to pay this high rent because, they just don't know better. And so
Oh,
LA is constantly getting an influx of people willing to pay a higher rent just to, as a cost of doing business to live here.
interesting. It's a whole different world.
It's
Oh,
yeah.
well, I guess it's expensive rent here too, but we don't have no ocean next to us. So
You guys,
I'm
are
pretty
you
good.
in Milwaukee?
Madison,
Oh,
Madison,
Madison.
Wisconsin. Yeah.
Yeah, my
So still
stepdad.
beautiful area, but we have winter. So
Yeah. I've been to Milwaukee, Mequon. I got a bunch of friends there. My stepdad went to University of Wisconsin. He was the goalie for the soccer team for a couple
oh,
of years.
nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
All,
so interesting. I meet a lot of people, and almost everyone has been to Madison partying or doing something in that regard.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
almost, definitely say all over the country, arguably quite a bit all over the world, but
My best
definitely all over the country. It's
My best
interesting.
friends in college, where I went in Arizona, were all from Milwaukee.
That's funny.
I have so many friends from Milwaukee. It's such a great place.
Yeah.
Absolutely love everybody from Wisconsin. It's just a great place. I really, really love Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And yeah, been a fan of the football team as well. Big Ron Dane fan.
That's funny. Yeah, it was a name I haven't heard in a while. I don't want to keep you too long here, Arta, but I do have a quick question from a business. Let's say I'm a small business owner, let's say hypothetically, right? And I want to find an attorney. What should small business owners be looking for? Because there's 50 million numbers, right? You get on the Google machine, look for an attorney. How do you know what a
That
good attorney is, or what are the questions that you ask or should ask an attorney to find out if they can offer what you're looking for?
Honestly, that is a fantastic question. And as an attorney, we don't realize sometimes how difficult it is for people to even start a search. Best way, always, is just ask people. Ask people you know. The best referrals come from former clients for attorneys. And also, I think if I'm looking for an attorney myself, to help out, I always ask friends. If you know somebody who's also in business, ask them who their attorney is. And if they like them and what they're like. Attorneys, their personalities, run the gamut from, people who are extremely tight-lipped and nervous and don't want to do anything to kind of gunslingers, who will just walk into court unprepared and just be able to, well, not unprepared, but, but maybe not with the 50 hours of preparation somebody else would do and just kind of wing it and are able to carry the day with their personality. So you really have to find somebody, I would say, through referrals. If you can't do that, then through the bar association, local bar, call them and tell them you need this type of lawyer and they'll refer you to one. But also don't go with the first lawyer you meet if you're not 100% comfortable with them. Like I said, there's tons of different personalities that attorneys have, and you're going to get a different answer on a question from every single attorney you talk to in most cases. I mean, with different shades. And so you really have to work with somebody that you feel comfortable with, hire somebody that understands what you're trying to tell them, that takes time to listen, because you're going to be paying them a lot of money. So you need to be with somebody that you're very comfortable working with and will answer your questions and take the time and be patient. I think those are the most important things, because there's so much stuff to be uncovered in cases that people don't necessarily say right at the beginning to their attorney because they're not comfortable enough. And so when you're comfortable talking to your attorney and having a relationship with them, you're more likely to be open and give them the full story. Because one thing that I really caution people against is don't tell the attorney the story the way you want it to be. You know what I mean? Because you'll get a lot of people who have been to another attorney and they'll tell them the whole story, and then the attorney will say, well, everything sounds good except this one thing. And then they'll go to another attorney and then they'll tell them everything except that one thing, because they want the attorney to take their case and to help them. But at the end of the day, that's just going to make things more difficult for everybody, because now the attorney is going to have to, pivot at whatever point they find out about this information that was important. So yeah, be very upfront with your attorney, be honest with them. It's kind of like a doctor. Of course, there are certain things that you don't want to discuss with your doctor because they're embarrassing, but it's your doctor. Who else are you going to talk to about it? Attorneys, the same thing. Everything is confidential. Nobody's going to find out about it. And that's what they're there for. They're there to deal with difficult and embarrassing and situations where somebody did something stupid. Don't worry about being judged. Just worry about finding somebody who won't judge you and will listen to your story that you feel comfortable with.
Fair. I love it. Arta, thank you so much. Tell me, how can people find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. Arta Wildeboer. Sounds just like it's spelled, or spelled just like it sounds, I should say. But Arta Wildeboer, ARTA is my first name. I'm on LinkedIn. I have a website, artalawfirm.com. Don't want to plug too much. Also have a podcast, so you can search my name on iTunes and Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. I'll show up on there. And yeah, just internet is the best way.
Nice. I love it. Thank you so much for being on the show. You shared a lot of cool information. The legal thing, it's so interesting because people are good at a thing. They start a business in that thing and they forget, or maybe they don't realize that they need to know, or at least know who to talk to, hire the right people as far as the back end, the legal stuff, all that jazz.
Absolutely.
Big deal.
When you're good at one thing, stick to that. Let other people do the other things. Like, you wouldn't do your payroll or your taxes by yourself. Same thing with legal stuff. Don't do it by yourself because there's just too much at risk.
Fair. I love it. Thank you so much, Arta.
Dave, thank you. Wonderful talking to you, and go Badgers.
Yeah, right. This has been Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggle stories and triumphant successes of business owners across the land. We are locally underwritten by the Bank of Sun Prairie. If you're listening or watching this on the web, if you could do us a huge favor, give us a big old thumbs up, subscribe, and of course, share it with your entrepreneurial friends, especially those that if you asked them if they had an attorney, they'd say something like, "What's an attorney?" Because they probably need it. If they don't, they will soon, right? My name is James Kademan, and Authentic Business Adventures is brought to you by Calls on Call, offering call answering and receptionist services for service businesses across the country on the web at callsoncall.com. And of course, the Bold Business Book, a book for the entrepreneur in all of us, available wherever fine books are sold. We'd like to thank you, our wonderful listeners, as well as our guest, Arta Wildeboer, the attorney. Arta, can you tell us your website one more time?
Sure, it's Arta, ARTA, lawfirm.com, artalawfirm.com. You can find
Oh, that's super cool. Super easy, right?
Exactly.
Past episodes can be found morning, noon, and night at the podcast link found at drawincustomers.com. Thank you for listening. We will see you next week. I want you to stay awesome. And if you do nothing else, enjoy your business.